On the roller coaster that is the Jamal Murray experience, last night felt like we were reaching a crescendo. The question is, how long will it last? Could some unfamiliar bench contributors for the Nuggets suddenly make an impact as the postseason draws near on the back half of the All-Star break? Team Canada survived an upset against Sweden. Can Team USA do the same against Finland tonight in the highly anticipated Four Nations face-off? All things to come on today's rundown, and we begin with the Denver Nuggets. Oh boy, did we get a game from the Denver Nuggets last night as they smashed the Portland Trail Blazers for the second time in 72 hours in their final game before the All-Star break, recording their 8th straight win, extending their longest streak of the season. And no, it didn't come from a miraculous performance from Nikola Jokic, although, boy, did he have some moments. I mean, that tip-in, he does things still. For a guy that gets labeled as unathletic and can't jump over a piece of paper and this and that, he still finds ways to do things with the basketball that I'm not exactly sure makes sense in the realm of logic or physics. Jamal Murray was the star of the show last night. He was the belle of the ball, finishing with a blistering 55 points, 7 of 15 shooting from beyond the arc, tallied a couple of rebounds and some assists. Hard to really get those numbers up, in his perspective when you're scoring 55 points in the basket. And it really just felt like we got another glimpse of that champion Jamal, that champion Murray. It was playoff Murray. Then it was bubble Murray, who was dueling 50 burgers with Donovan Mitchell in the bubble back and forth as they came back from consecutive 3-1 deficits to head to the Western Conference Finals. And then we saw the final evolution of that Murray character arc with champion Murray as they hoisted their first Larry O'Brien trophy in franchise history. But since then, there's been a lot of speculation and a lot of question about whether or not, A, Jamal Murray can return to that peak level of athleticism, especially after being handed a $200+ million extension this past offseason. And last night was proof that that player is still in there. And you'll have people on both sides of this polarizing aisle that say that player's always been there. And, you guys are doubting him and you're hating on him. And then there's the other side that's like, okay, well, if that player's in there, why don't we see it more often? And why does it have to be such a peaks and valleys experience as it relates to Jamal Murray, who's playing alongside Nikola Jokic, the greatest basketball player in the world, and has had the same surrounding cast, with the exception of KCP, in general, since they won the title. So there hasn't been a ton of variable change from a team perspective. The Western Conference and the league around the Nuggets has certainly gone through some seismic shifting. But it really comes down to, this is just part of who it seems Jamal Murray is as a player. He's somebody that, while shows the ability on any given night to be one of the most prolific sharpshooters in the National Basketball Association, he can go through many other nights where you understand, or you look at that performance and say, okay, that's a player that I can understand has never been an all-star. And it is frustrating. I feel frustrated about it. I know all of you out there feel frustrated about it. And as we continue to go along on this show, if you disagree with any of the things that I'm about to say, please let me know. And I would love to get to those at the end of the show. But as it relates to Jamal Murray, it really has been this up and down roller coaster of, he is a player that, on any given 5-game stretch can average, 16, 17, 18. I think he averages right under 20 points per game traditionally for his career as a scorer. But then he can have nights where he just erupts for 40, 50, 55 points, 55 points being the third most prolific scoring game in franchise history for the Denver Nuggets, trailing only David Thompson's 73-point outing in 1978 and Nikola Jokic's 56-point performance in December of just this past year. So that talent is there, but it doesn't really make sense to me, at least. And I don't think we have a definitive definition as to why you don't see more of a flatline level toward that production. You can't be expected to score 55 points on a semi-regular basis, let alone, a consistent basis in the NBA. It's just not the way that this Nuggets team is constructed. And there's just frankly not a lot of players ever that can meet that bar. So I don't think that that's the expectation for Jamal Murray. But I think there's a sneaky undercard in the argument or the stat that we give for Jamal Murray, who is statistically speaking the largest playoff riser in NBA history. And what I mean by that is he has the largest jump in scoring production from the regular season to the postseason in the entire history of the NBA. He jumps up 7 or 8, I believe. I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but I believe he jumps up close to 10 points per game on average in the regular season compared to the playoffs once those start. And I think the sneaky under-discussed element about that stat that I think in the past has been used as a positive as it relates to Jamal Murray is that in order for that to happen, it might just mean that the floor is kind of low. It's easy to clear a bar if the bar is set lower to the ground than it should be for any specific evaluation. And I kind of think that that's where we're at with Jamal. So just like we have the conversations and the frustrations about Michael Porter Jr., who I've said time and time again, despite the fact that he's had to battle through injuries through college in the first couple of years of his NBA career and has seemingly, knock on wood, done that to a very high degree thus far. Michael Porter Jr., from a physical standpoint, he possesses any kind of mismatch threat that a Kevin Durant, who just became the 8th player to eclipse 30,000 points in the NBA in the history of the NBA, he presents the same exact kind of mismatch in terms of the danger he is with the basketball in his hands, his shooting ability combined with his size at 6'10", and the range that he has and the impact he can make really across lots of spaces on the court. And I give credit to Michael Porter Jr. for expanding his game beyond being that three-point vulture who kind of hangs out beyond the arc and hopes that the ball gets dished to him so he can just pop and shoot. He's found ways to be more productive inside the paint and in the mid-range, and I think it's helped evolve the overall effectiveness of the Denver Nuggets offense. But as it relates to Jamal Murray, I just think that that's something that we have to accept. And I think that that's the lens that you have to look through when you're handing a guy a $200+ million extension over the next 4 years after this season, and how that's going to impact your future roster construction going forward. So while this performance from Jamal Murray last night was amazing and it was great, and if Jamal Murray can return to that level of form in the postseason and not do that night in and night out, but have the consistent baseline of production that is higher than what he's been giving in the regular season and maintain the possibility to erupt, especially from a scoring perspective and beyond the three-point line like he did, I think that significantly impacts the way that the Nuggets can go about this postseason run and how far they're able to make it in a Western Conference that continues to kind of fortify and strengthen around them, most predominantly with the Oklahoma City Thunder, who I don't believe anyone is going to be able to catch in the Western Conference, at least. Because while Nikola Jokic is the sun for the Denver Nuggets and he is the best player in basketball and everything the Nuggets do revolves around him, there is a hard limiter on how far that Jokic alone can take them. I think we all know that. We saw it early in Jokic's career as he really kind of started to begin his ascension of basketball dominance, that he could carry this team on its back to, a 5 seed, a 6 seed, a 4 seed even, and then get into the first or maybe the second round of the playoffs, and you just hit a wall against a more cohesive, more talented NBA team. And that's what we saw. And Nikola Jokic has exponentially increased his ability to kind of shoulder the burden and carry the Nuggets to a degree where he's kind of like the Tom Izzo of the NBA, in a sense of like, the narrative being that like a Tom Izzo, a Mike Krzyzewski, those guys are going to be able to coach any team to a final or to a March Madness tournament bid. And then how far you go from there, well, it depends on how the dice fall. That's Nikola Jokic in essence for the Denver Nuggets. But there's a hard limiter in terms of their ceiling and how well they're going to be able to progress through the postseason. And it relates to Jamal Murray. We've discussed on this station a handful of times that traditionally speaking on a championship team, the number 2 scorer, the second best player all around on a championship team is traditionally a Hall of Fame caliber player. And I don't know that that's the case for Jamal Murray. He still has years left to play and can certainly change that narrative about himself. But Jamal Murray not only is not like a generally accepted Hall of Fame caliber NBA player, he's never been an all-star. So not just a Hall of Famer, but not an all-star. And yet the Nuggets were able to do it. And I think it's because in that postseason, Jamal did play outside of his traditional scope and he elevated to the level of play that you would qualify for the second best player on a championship team. It's just that we didn't see it much after that. And when we did see it, it was more of a supernova or a flash in the pan. And then you had to kind of navigate, several games, several week, even sometimes several month stretches where those kind of performances weren't happening. So if the Nuggets are going to make a run at a Western Conference final or an NBA Finals appearance after falling short in one of the most dramatic and embarrassing losses, in my opinion, in franchise history, giving up a 20-point lead in the second half to the Minnesota Timberwolves and really just getting bullied off of the home floor, if they're going to be able to avenge that loss and get back to having an opportunity to maximize the championship window in the core of Nikola Jokic's prime, Jamal Murray has to play closer to that level of basketball that we saw last night than he did before. Now, it's granted that the Nuggets were without Aaron Gordon and Michael Porter Jr. and Peyton Watson and Russell Westbrook. So there weren't as many mouths to feed on the offensive side of the ball for the Denver Nuggets, which allows Jamal Murray to take 35-plus shots a night and 15 from beyond the arc and really try to get into that rhythm as a shooter. But even with those guys in the lineup, when we have a healthy playoff rotation level team for the Denver Nuggets, he's still going to need to be that level of facilitator. But I don't know that even just Jamal Murray playing at that level is good enough, because what we've seen with the Denver Nuggets, the issue that we have is similar in some ways to what we've seen with the Colorado Avalanche as it relates to the struggles that they've had, and that's depth. The Nuggets have one of the better core fours and have had a strong starting five as it relates to the rest of the playoff NBA landscape for a handful of years now. Really, post-COVID, it's been that way. But it's been a lack of trust on Michael Malone's part, who doesn't enjoy playing the pups. He doesn't like mixing in young players once it gets to the postseason. And some of that is to be understood when you think about the dynamics of an NBA head coach and the things that they have to worry about from a job security standpoint and the pressure that there is to win. And that, again, is kind of the natural force that's beginning to seem to butt heads between Michael Malone and Calvin Booth. But if you have a strong core four and you've paid those four guys, there's only so much room to go around, just the same as the Avalanche, who have one of the best top sixes in the National Hockey League and have had for some time. When you have all those guys locked up, especially in a restrictive cap sport like hockey, it doesn't leave you much more room to play with. And I think that's why we saw, inspiration behind the Mikko Rantanen trade in an effort to kind of, shave off a slice of the cake with the hope that you can spread the rest around a little bit more evenly. The Nuggets, because of cap restrictions and inflexibility that they've found themselves into, in large part because of some swings and misses by Calvin Booth, who, definitely was a big part of bringing in Bruce Brown and KCP, which is a major factor in why they won a championship in the first place. The moves since then have seemed to be a little bit more on the miss than the hit as it relates to, the dealing of Reggie Jackson and having to front load assets and draft picks to try to move that contract, to create some flexibility, to bring in a guy like Dario Saric, who's lucky if he sees the court the rest of this NBA season for the Denver Nuggets. But if they're going to be able to compete beyond Jokic being Jokic and Jamal being that Robin, that NBA champion level player, as far as a second fiddle, they're going to need some unlikely contributors from their lower half of their unit, that bench rotation, as it shrinks down to 7 or 8 players in the postseason. They're going to need some unlikely contributors. And one of them may have just been named a rising star, and that is Julian Strawther, who was just named to the 2025 NBA Rising Stars game, replacing Portland's Scoot Henderson. I always love some of these newer generation athlete names in college football and basketball. Scoot Henderson, such a fun name. But he's dealing with injuries for Portland. Julian Strawther selected to replace them. And Julian Strawther, at least for me, and someone who's paid attention and has watched a lot of the Nuggets this season, and frankly, a lot of the Nuggets for the last several years, Julian Strawther's year has kind of flown a little bit under the radar for me. I'm curious if it has for you. Julian Strawther is the lone Nugget to have played in every single game this season. And if you look at, and I'm going to give you some qualifiers here, and sometimes those drive me nuts, but just bear with me. If you look at second-year guards, second-year bench players, Julian Strawther's production this season has been magnificent. He ranks first in total points, minutes played, field goals made, field goals attempted, 3-point field goals made, and 3-point field goals attempted. So while his contributions haven't been, he's only been in the starting lineup 3 times. By the way, they're 3-0 in those games. And they have a pretty strong record with him in general when he's a part of the rotation, obviously because of where they're at and he's played in every game. But he could be, and I'm not saying he will be, but I think he could be, or he has presented some evidence that he could be a player that has a little bit of an unsuspecting boost and a lift and impact, the way that we saw Christian Braun come out of college at Kansas off winning a national championship and dive right into a NBA championship, NBA finals contending Nuggets team, to where he was averaging 15 points against the Miami Heat in the finals as a rookie, coming off the bench and being that spark plug and being that energy. Well, Christian Braun's in the starting lineup now. Russell Westbrook was brought in to be a leader of the second unit and kind of be the guy that can help squeeze and juice some production out of the lower half of the roster. But he's had to be thrust into the starting lineup a bunch in the regular season, and it remains to be seen. And I think we're all curious as to how Michael Malone's going to handle that when it gets to the postseason. But if you've got guys like Julian Strawther coming off the bench who are going to be able to produce at the level that we've seen Julian Strawther produce recently, and I think we're going to get another chance in a showcase exhibition like the Rising Stars game to see what he can do, that could be a secret sizzle for the Nuggets that gives them a lift that maybe we weren't expecting at the start of the season. To a lesser degree, you've got Jalen Pickett, who's been thrust into action with this laundry list of injuries and nagging inabilities that the Nuggets have been experiencing, from Aaron Gordon to Russell Westbrook to Peyton Watson, and Michael Porter Jr. Jalen Pickett could be somebody, although I think that's a little bit of a stretch, again, considering Michael Malone's aversion to playing the young guys. And even Zeke Naji, who myself, again, I'll raise my hand, and I think a lot of people have been frustrated with the prospect of Zeke Naji, given the contract that he was handed out by Calvin Booth. And the things that he's been able to do have been very minimal from an impact standpoint on the court. But even a guy like Zeke Naji recorded 4 blocks last night and played a decent amount of minutes, in a game against a admittedly listless Portland Trailblazer team that's double-digit games below 500 and doesn't seem to be moving anywhere too quickly. So I just want to put it out there. I think that this performance from Jamal is worthy of praise. I think it is worthy of acknowledgement, recognition, whatever adjective, superlative, Sean Payton style that you want to throw in there. But I do think we need to remember, and I think it's okay for those to question why we don't see more of that more often, and why does it have to be the postseason where that comes alive, when some of those performances early in the season or during the regular season, more of those performances can have a significant impact on the chemistry of the team, the efficiency of the team, and how their postseason landscape shakes out. So I just think that that's fair. While I understand, I'm not trying to poo-poo it, I do think it brings a little bit of a frustrating element as to why we don't see it more. And in the event that we don't see it as often as we'd like, I think it's going to be incumbent on younger players and bench players like Julian Strawther and Russell Westbrook and Jalen Pickett and the like to potentially have to, by force of circumstance, even if Michael Malone doesn't want it, make an impact in the postseason. So we will see how that shakes out. As it relates to the National Hockey League, boy, did we have a hockey game last night. For those of you that weren't able to catch it, Team Canada and that star-studded lineup that features Sidney Crosby, Nathan McKinnon, Cale Makar, Connor McDavid, one of the best power play assemblies that you could ever imagine if you were to dream up a fantasy hockey scenario. That is what we're dealing with Team Canada. And like I said yesterday, Canada was a heavy favorite to win. Finland, not so much, but Finland is scrappy. And they proved it last night. They fell down to a 2-0 lead early. In the first minute of play, you saw one of the nastiest shot statistical combinations that I think is borderline. It should be illegal in some facets, to where you can have a stat line read a goal from Nathan McKinnon by way of Sidney Crosby and Connor McDavid. I mean, those 3 names being strung together on a scoring play is disgusting. And the other thing that's disgusting is the thought that I had, that I'm sure all of you had, watching Sidney Crosby and Nathan McKinnon play alongside each other. Sidney Crosby, one of the greatest hockey players of his generation, a 4-time champion, somebody who has been at the top of the game for so long and still, even at an advanced age, proves that there are things that number 87 can do that others just can't. And the prospect of bringing Sidney Crosby and Nathan MacKinnon, who have a personal friendship and a relationship and a kinship and a chemistry together, the prospect of bringing those two players side by side for an Avalanche team that's looking to regain their footing and chase down another Stanley Cup is so tantalizing. And there's just an inner part of me that knows the difficulties and the nuances that a move like that would make, because Sidney Crosby may not care about winning another cup. He's done those things. He's had those moments in the brightest lights. And Sidney Crosby's focus may be more about just being Mr. Pittsburgh, being the legend of that city and being the best Penguin, or having an argument to be the best Penguin of all time. But man, there is a part of me watching that happen that just wants to look Chris McFarland directly in the eyes through my TV and say, get it done. Figure it out. I don't care what it takes. Just do it, because man, it's special. And to watch the intensity and the tenacity with which the players on both sides of Canada and Sweden, the way that they played, it was something that, again, just makes me remember this is the way All-Star games should be, and they're not. The Pro Bowl used to be that way. They used to knock the crap out of each other. And now it's a flag football game and a glorified skills competition, and we get to laugh about Eli beating Peyton once again. And the NBA All-Star game is a joke. It's like the race to 247 points. And I know they keep changing the formats, and we're playing like round robin style, and it's a smaller scoring size and things of that nature. But this is how I think, in a perfect world, All-Star games should be played, in the format of this Four Nations face-off. And I think that the nationalism aspect of it, playing for your country, playing for national pride, definitely adds to that, in addition to hockey just being a gritty sport from a hardwired standpoint. There was no coasting in that. I mean, Nathan MacKinnon producing 4 dangerous scoring chances in an overtime period over and over and over again. And he didn't end up winning the game, but man, I don't know anybody that would want to trade places with Philip Gustafsson, the goalie for Sweden. That must have been like being on Normandy Beach to a certain degree, where pucks are just flying at you from all different directions, and you got 3 of the 5 or 6 best players in hockey who are just barraging you with scoring attempts after you've made a pretty miraculous comeback, falling into a 2-0 hole, being able to stalemate it at 3-3. Devon Taves got absolutely robbed on a scoring attempt there from Gustafsson. And just for a guy to be able to do all of that and exhaust all of that energy and stand on his head to the degree that he could, only to have Mitch Marner slice one through for a game winner, it has to be demoralizing. Now, you still get a point for an overtime loss, and I get that. But man, that being the appetizer, the stage setter in Montreal, where you have the roar of the crowd for Mario Lemieux before the game, and you can hear the Crosby chants in Montreal, and kind of the disdain that they have in some ways for Team USA and for American hockey, the way that it is there. And again, infusing that nationalistic pride, that has me so excited for tonight's game. And I think it's a shot off the bow for a Team USA against Finland, because Sweden was a heavy underdog. I think they were like a plus 260 underdog here, and they almost had it. They forced it to overtime, and you just couldn't survive, because eventually the dam is going to break when you've got the likes of Connor McDavid, Cale Makar, Nathan MacKinnon, and Sidney Crosby barraging you with pucks over and over and over again. But I think this is a shot over the bow for Team USA to say, hey, you might be heavy favorites against Finland, and you have a goaltender who is going to win the Vezina and may even win the Hart Trophy this year, and somebody that's going to anchor and be your key to maybe beating a talented team like Canada. Don't overlook a team like Finland. So I will have my eyes glued to it. The Nuggets and the NBA are officially on their All-Star break. I can't wait to check out Julian Strother in the Rising Stars game, and obviously the lone other participant in All-Star Weekend, Nikola Jokic, in the All-Star game for the definitely not transparent at all setup that they have for the All-Star game with like the old heads, the young bucks, and the international players. As you look at the three teams that are picked for this All-Star Weekend, I'll have my eye on that. But I am excited, genuinely excited for this hockey game against Finland tonight to see what this is all about, because as we'll get into tomorrow, this could be a one and done for the four nations face-off based off of some legislation and some ruling and some governing body work between the National Hockey League and the Players Association about future events of this nature to come. So now I'd like to turn it over to you. Tell me, am I crazy? Am I not? How do we feel about Jamal Murray? How do we feel about the potential impact of a Julian Strother? That Team Canada-Sweden game was epic. This tournament is so good. Let's go USA. Mel, I'm totally with you. I agree. I think that hockey, which, as we've seen over the course of this season and for a handful of years now, has had an eyeballs problem, I think, from a rating standpoint. I think that it's the most niche sport of, I think, the four major American professional sports, which I think turns a lot of people off. There's a huge international influence from Canada to Russia, to Sweden, to Finland, and all these other countries that I think makes it less palatable unless you grow up in a hockey family for kids growing up. But I'll tell you what, I do think that their lack of popularity does not have to do with the quality of the product that they put out there. Because again, how could you ask for more? If you're just a true bona fide fan of sports, how could you ask for more than a collection of the sport's best players being segmented and spliced up and chopped into lines and formations that you would never normally see? And it's a true best on best tournament, the likes of which hadn't happened between Canada and Sweden since Sochi 10 years ago. What more could you ask for than those guys going at each other in a gladiator-like sport that I maintain, although I think football gets labeled the ultimate gladiator sport, I don't know that there's too many tougher people on the face of the earth than hockey players. When you look at some of the injuries that they sustain and the grind that they put their bodies through over an 82-game season, couldn't agree with you more, Mel. I'm stoked to watch how the rest of this tournament pans out. Let's get it. I agree. I'm with it. I will say that I think that I didn't naturally grow up a hockey fan as a kid, but it's something that I found later in life once it was clear that I was not athletic enough to play a sport like that or be any good at it, I should say. I have truly grown to love the watching aspect of an appreciation for the difficulty, the degree of difficulty that these athletes are able to perform and make it look effortless. There are a few more poetic, beautiful things that I've seen. And it's kind of a juxtaposition because the other half of the sentence is then watching Nathan MacKinnon skate on the ice. He looks like he's in fast forward when everybody else is in slow motion. Connor McDavid, same kind of situation. But it's almost like that's almost not the best way to describe it, because Nathan MacKinnon skating on the ice is like a runaway freight train. He's like the angriest athlete I've ever seen in my life. If you just watched him with no context, you would be like, this guy wants to hurt someone. And yet he does it in such a smooth and crafty way that it just feels like it's like poetry in motion, and it might look chaotic, but it's controlled chaos. I saw a comment there about the injuries. That's actually an interesting point from Mel, because I agree with you. And if you're the Vegas Golden Knights, you're probably a little frustrated with the outcome of that game last night as it relates to an injury standpoint. But here's what I'll say. If this is what you want, if we enjoy watching this to a certain degree, there's an acceptable level of risk, right? I mean, we can get injured every day the second we step out of our doors. We can get struck by lightning. We can trip and fall on a curb. We could, get in a fender bender, or, I could keel over right at the conclusion of this show for some reason that I'll never see coming. And I think that, well, that's maybe an extreme example as it relates to professional sports, because these kind of tournaments are preventable. You don't have to play, or if you're selected to play, there's, certain abilities to be able to opt out of things. But I think that we as the sports consumers, if we want these things and we enjoy these things and we commit our money and our time and our energy into consuming this product, we have to be okay with rolling those dice. Because I promise you, if it was Nathan McKinnon that left that game last night, and is not going to be able to return for the rest of the tournament and maybe not be able to return before the restart after this face-off break, I would be frustrated. I would, but I think it would be hypocritical of me to talk about how much I enjoy it and how much I love it if I didn't also, in the same token, accept the risk that that kind of thing could happen to a member of the Colorado Avalanche, the team that I pull for, just as it did the Vegas Golden Knights. So all in all, I'm just excited that we have meaningful action and we have things that we can look for. The NFL season is turning its page to the next chapter, and some cool little highlights that I don't know if you saw on our ticker right below here. In fact, it's the one going across right now as it relates to the Broncos. Garrett Bowles taking a volunteer position for player development at Legend High School, where I used to live 15 minutes away from that school before it was built, down there in Parker. Super cool. Just another way to ingratiate the Denver Broncos into the community. Oh, that's very nice. Thank you, Mel. Your show is great, and your interaction with the viewers is great. That's my favorite. That's truly my favorite part of the whole show. And now I just feel like I'm about to kick my feet back, and we're just going to chat until, I decide until I get a notification that I have to run to another meeting, or Trey just decides to shut the camera off from behind the screen there. But I genuinely enjoy, because I don't get to hear from the opinions of everybody. On the radio side, we have the text line and you can call in and you can do all these things, but there's not the same instant immediate access always on the digital landscape, but we have that here. And I'm so excited to be able to get to converse with you and hear your sides of things, or tell me that I'm an idiot or that I'm a genius. The scale of which you do those things is totally up to you. Because I hear myself talk every single day. And I don't love the sound of my own voice, but I appreciate the opportunity to converse back and forth with all of you, which I will look forward to doing again tomorrow. That is all the time we have for today. Please, 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 if you have not, go to our Denver Sports 104.3 The Fan YouTube channel. Click that like button. Click that subscribe button. We have so much content coming out every single day, from the radio side with Stokely and Evans and Mark Schlereth, and Dover and Cecil, and The Drive with Zach By and Philip Lindsay. We've got every single fix for every single fancy that you can imagine. Cecil Lammy and Andrew Mason do a wonderful job on Orange and Blue today. I've got this new show here on the Rundown that I'm so excited to share with you. Joey Freeberg in the morning with the Denver Sports Daily, just a fantastic headline-hitting morning recap of the previous day's events. Mile High Hoops with Jake Shapiro, Mile High Hockey with Will Peterson and Mike Evans. There's just so much great sports content here at this station, here on these social media channels, and available to you. And I hope that we can continue to share these interactions for a long time to come. Until then, I will see you all at the same time and the same place tomorrow.
I do what I love what I do. Second nature to put in the work. I only improve this crazy body don't